video, we're going to work with half angle identities. Okay? And then it says use the half angle identities to evaluate exactly. So let's start with tangent, okay? And we have 7 pi over 8. Now, what I want you to do, and this is how I would do it. Again, if you find an easier way to solve it, that's fine with me, as long as it's correct, right? So I want you to take the angle, in this case 7 pi over 8, and then I want you to equal it to x over 2, which is your half angle. And then we multiply on both sides by 2 over 1 to get rid of the denominator, and we get 14 pi over 8 equals to x, and can be reduced into 7 pi over 4. So tangent of 7 pi over 8 is equal, by your formula, plus or minus square root of 1 minus cosine of 7 pi over 4 over 1 plus cosine of 7 pi over 4. Now we continue. What is that equal to? Well, plus or minus square root of 1 minus, let's go to the unit circle. 7 pi over 4 is 315 degrees, which is the cosine is square root of 2 over 2. So this becomes radical 2 over 2 over 1 plus radical 2 over 2. Okay. Now, plus or minus radical. Well, again, you will need a common denominator. So it'll be 2 over 2. So 2 over 2 minus radical 2 over 2 over 2 over 2 plus radical 2 over 2. Now I know it gets a little uncomfortable because you're working inside a radical, but that's how you do it. Okay, plus or minus radical 2 minus radical 2 over 2 over 2 plus radical 2 over 2. Make sure this radical is long enough. Okay. When you have a fraction over dividing another fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal. It's going to be 2 minus radical 2 over 2 times 2 over 2 plus radical 2 over 2. Now, the 2's, so 2 over 2 is equal to 1, so we can get rid of them. You're left with 2 minus radical 2 over 2 plus radical 2. Now, the hard part of tangent is always that there's radicals in the denominators. So let's multiply by the conjugate of 2 plus radical 2, which is 2 minus radical 2 over 2 minus radical 2. Now we need to FOIL. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times negative radical 2 is negative 2 radical 2. Negative radical 2 times 2 is negative 2 radical 2. And negative radical 2 times negative radical 2 is plus radical 4. Same thing in the denominator, we FOIL. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times negative radical 2 is negative 2 radical 2. Positive radical 2 times 2 is positive 2 radical 2. And positive radical 2 times negative radical 2 is negative radical 4. Okay, we continue. Now, 4 cannot subtract this, but these two are common values. So negative 2 radical 2 minus negative 2 radical 2 is negative 4 radical 2 plus radical 4 is just 2. The inner terms equal to 0, so you're left with 4 minus radical 2, which is 2. So let's continue here. 4 plus 2 is 6, so this is 6 minus 4, radical 2 over 4 minus 2 is 2. Now, whenever you have a subtraction or addition in the numerator and nothing on the denominator except a number, you can split it into two fractions. So you have 6 over 2 minus 4 over 2 radical 2. That can be simplified to 6 divided by 2 is 3, 4 divided by 2 is 2, radical 2. Now, you need to know if it's plus or minus. I've been writing it down, but I haven't told you, well, which one is it? Well, let's look at the angle. 7 pi over 8. Well, let's see in what quadrant my 7 pi over 8 might lie. So, let's check with the 3 pi's, with the denominator of 4. If you have 7 pi over 8, then you can find a common denominator with each of these 4 angles that have denominator of 4. This one is, if it's pi over 8, pi over 4, this is 2 pi over 4. 2 pi over 8, sorry. If this is 3 pi over 4, then this can be written as 6 pi over 8. If this is 5 pi over 4, then it can be written as 10 pi over 8. Now, notice that 7 pi over 8 must be between 6 pi over 8 and 10 pi over 8. So which one is it? Well, what's pi? Well, let's make pi in a denominator of 8. Pi is 8 pi over 8. So that means that 7 pi over 8 must be in your second quadrant. Therefore, on the second quadrant, tangent is negative. So, in our answer, in reality is minus radical 3 minus 2 radical 2. And I know it was a little tricky. There was a lot of things to cover. Just re-watch it again if you have any doubt and try to understand each step. Now let's go ahead and do cosine. This one should be a little easier. Now it's still in degrees, so you still have to do 165. Let's use a different color. Okay, so we're still going to do the 165 equals x over 2, which means that if I multiply by 2 on both sides, 2 over 1, 2 over 1, 2 times 165 is the same thing as 330 equal to x degrees. Now, if you look at 330, that's the same thing as 11 pi over 6. Okay, so cosine of 330 is radical 3 over 2. So on my equation, notice that it's again plus or minus radical 1 plus cosine of 330 over 2. Now, the cosine is easier to identify since it's in angles in which quadrant it is. Well, 165 degrees is clearly in the second quadrant. So cosine is negative on the second quadrant. So this is going to be negative radical 1 plus, now cosine of 330, like we said earlier, is radical 3 over 2 over 2. Now, negative radical, okay, we need a common denominator. Careful with this division here. It might be tempting to just cancel the 2's, but do not do that. We need to add the fractions first. So 2 over 2 plus radical 3 over 2 over 2. So minus again outside. So 2 plus radical 3 over 2 over 2. And again, it might be tempting to say 2 over 2 is 1. That's not what's going on. This is a fraction divided by a number. It's the same thing as the fraction times the reciprocal of the number, which is 1 over 2. So you're left with negative radical 2 plus radical 3 over 4. Now by properties of radicals, you can split it into two divisions. So it's negative radical of 2 plus radical 3 over the radical of 4, which gives you negative radical 2 plus radical 3 over 2. And that's your answer. Now for sine, very similar. Let's change colors to avoid confusion. Let's make it green. So again, you write 22.5 equals to x over 2. We multiply by 2 on both sides. 22.5 times 2 is 45 degrees. Is to x. So for sine, look at the identity. It's plus or minus radical 1 minus cosine of x over 2. So this becomes plus or minus radical of 1 minus cosine of 45 degrees over 2. Notice that 22.5 is in between 90 and 0, so it's in the first quadrant, so this is positive. So square root of 1 minus cosine of 45 degrees, you can see that is square root of 2 over 2, radical 2 over 2 over 2. Now notice how similar this process is. Again, common denominator. So 2 over 2 minus radical 2 over 2 over 2. Radical 2 minus radical 2 over 2 over 2. Again, do not be tempted to say that that's equal to 1 because it's not. You have a fraction over a number. We multiply by the reciprocal, which is 1 over 2. Reciprocal of this is 2 over 1 is 1 over 2. So now we multiply across. So you're left with 2 radical 2 over 4. And now we can split it into 2. So radical 2 minus radical 2 over radical 4, which becomes radical 2 minus radical 2 over 2. And that's your answer for sine of 22.5. I know there was a long process. I will suggest you watch the video again, try to redo the problems, and try to get all the little details that are inside this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed doing it. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments below or ask me in class. Thank you.